This
us begin.
conference will now be recorded.
Aha. Yes. Okay. So as we are in the midst of Svira, anybody who has not yet signed up to give a little drush, a little talk, Marty, on Shavuos night. Okay, so either early in the night or late in the night, one just not in the middle. Uh-huh. Is counting. Sefirat Omer is the counting of the Omer. So one of the things that we find in our Sidurim, in the prayers that accompany that, is this Kabbalistic parallel between each day of the Sefira, of the counting, all the way until Shavuot, and how that aligns on a Kabbalistic level. Now, it's interesting because when we talk in Kabbalistic terms, so we talk about the 10 Sefirot. So here we have Sefirat, the counting of the Omer, and we also have the idea of the 10 Sefirot, which we'll see in a minute. Countings, levels. We'll discuss that in just a moment. Okay, so we have seen that there are different aspects, dimensions to the Sefira, right? Most basically, the counting. Most basically, it links Pesach, Passover, to Shavuot, right? And it is that build-up between Pesach and Shavuot, almost like a Chol HaMoed, intermediate days of the holiday. Like we have Pesach, the first 2 days are holiday, last 2 days are like Yom Tov holiday, the middle are intermediary days. We have Sukkot, first 2 days are holiday, last 2 days, Shmini Atzeres, Simchat Torah holidays, the middle days between are Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days, Chol, the mundane of the Moed, of the holiday, right? We still eat in a sukkah and all those things. You still don't eat chametz on Pesach, but it's not actual holiday. There are those that compare, I believe Ramban compares the days in between, the days of Sefira, to be Chol HaMoed-like days. Pesach, those 8 days of Pesach, 7 in Israel, 8 days outside of Israel, Pesach is our physical exodus from Egypt, and Shavuot is the spiritual exodus, ascent from Egypt, and the days in between are the days like the Chol HaMoed days. It's also a time, as we discussed last time, that we mourn the deaths of Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students, and also other tragedies that took place during this time. Okay, so what's clear is whether we're looking at this ascent or we're dealing with the tragic events, we recognize that this is a time for our spiritual growth, for us to become better versions of ourselves. How is this meant to be done? And there is a framework that was built for this, and this is the alignment that I mentioned earlier. So let's look at source number 1. Let me go back over here for those who are online. Number 1, Rav Yaakov Haber. Mankind was created in the image of God. What does that mean? God has no corporeality. It isn't our physical image, but rather our character that has godly potential. The Sefirot are a mystical revelation of God's character. The Sefirot represent our finite understanding of the infinite. I think it's phrased beautifully. Our finite understanding of the infinite. There are 10 Sefirot, so to speak, with which God created and interacts with the world. They are Chachma, Bina, Da'at, which forms the acronym of Lubavitcher Hasidim, Chabad, Chachma, Bina, Da'at, and then Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut. These 10 Sefirot are divided into 2 categories. The 3 upper Sefirot of Chachma, Bina, and Da'at, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and the lower 7 that we are going to go through. It is the lower 7 Sefirot that we focus on during the 7 weeks of Sefirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. And these are numbers that constantly come up in Judaism, the 7 and the 3. Right? Think about your tefillin for a moment. Right? What do we do with our tefillin? Around the arm? 7 times. Right? Some do 3 up over here also. Right? Others don't. But around the finger, we have the 3. 7, 3. Right? I recently heard on a shiur that King Solomon, right? He had many, many wives and concubines. Who knows how many? 1,000, but it wasn't just 1,000. It's broken down to 700 wives and 300 concubines. 7, 3, right? Which means that that there were these Kabbalistic aspects of what he was trying to bring about with all of these marriages. And throughout, we have 3737. So we focusing over here, it is the lower 7 Sefirot that we focus on during the 7 weeks of Sefirat HaOmer, right? And we're constantly going in cycles of 7, right? 7 days of the week, and then Shabbat, 7 months. And then the 7th month is replete with holidays: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret. Right? The years, Shemitah years. The 7th year is the Shemitah year. The Shemitah cycles. After those 7 cycles, we have the Yovel, the Jubilee year. We're constantly going in 7 and also 7 and 3. 10. It's not just a coincidence that 10 is the number for a minyan. Right? That's when it becomes this not disparate individuals, but it congeals into a single different unit comprised of those 10, right? And if you think of a breakdown, so to speak, of a light being diffused and the holiness coming down in 10, so look at our bodies, how it starts as 1, and then it breaks down by the extremities, by the hands, there's 10. By the feet, there's 10. So someone said to me, well, Rabbi, don't you think that it's because we have that, that's how we get this 10? I said, no, I don't think that. I think because we have this spiritual root of 10, that's what we were created in a way that results in the 10 and the 10. So these are concepts that are constantly, it's interesting. You know, when my kids were in Israel, when kids are learning the alphabet, so they had like a little nickname for each of the letters to help them remind what it was. Chet was chalon. If you speak Hebrew, chalon is a window, and chet looks like a window. What do my kids call Yud? Katanchik. Katanchik means the little one. So isn't it interesting that Yud becomes the smallest letter? But that's really, again, the idea of this minyan, that it's no longer this Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, 1 through 9. It is now congealed into a completely different entity, and it becomes Echad. It becomes 1. Okay. So let's go a little bit further. Where do we see from Tanakh, from Scripture, this idea of the 7 Sefirot? So actually, it's it's from Divrei Hayamim Chronicles, and it's part of our regular davening. Whenever we take out the Torah, what do we say? L'cha Hashem hagedula v'hagvura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod kichol b'shamayim uva'aretz l'cha Hashem hamamlacha v'hamit na'aseh l'chol l'rosh. To you, God, are the gedula, the greatness, and that's a reference to chesed. V'ha-gevura, the strength, that is gevura. V'ha-tiferet, that is splendor. We'll explain each of these shortly. That is the splendor. V'ha-netzach, that is eternity. V'ha-hod, and the glory. Kichol b'shamayim uva'aretz, that is all. Everything that is in heavens and earth, that is Yesod. L'cha Hashem hamamlacha. The last one is Malchut. To you, Hashem, belongs kingship, and that is Malchut. Va'mitnaseh l'chol l'rosh. And you are elevated up above every head. So that pasuk is the pasuk which lays out for us these 7 sfirot in their actual order. Okay, so great. So these are attributes of God. But how does that connect to the idea of humankind, of us improving ourselves? So once again, Rabbi Haber, number 3. As much as the Sfirot reveal about God himself, they also hold the key to understanding what it means to have been created in God's image. And just as we must apply a unified understanding to the personality of God, we must strive to round out our own personality with a lesson of each Sefirat. Okay, this is very, very important. We have to have this unified understanding to the personality of God. Actually, one of the things that we say at the end of Aleinu every day, a pasuk from Zechariah, Bayom Ahu, on that day, Yeh Hashem Echad, Ushmo Echad. God will be one and his name will be one. What does that mean? Then God will be one and his name will be one. And the commentators explain, right now we have many different names for God, right? Most generally, we have names which refer to Rachamim and those which refer to Din. Rachamim is compassion and Din is judgment. And these are the two forces, the two general forces that come into the world. Actually, once again, on our tefillin, we have the straps that hang down. The one on the right is meant to be longer than the one on the left. Why? Because the one on the right represents chesed, kindness, compassion. The one on the left represents din. But where do they both emanate from? The kesher, the knot. Meaning we have the tefillin here, and then we have the chesed, we have the gevura, we have right and left coming out, but then they become intertwined in a knot that you can't tell which is which. It looks like a dalid, but the kesher is in the shape of a dalid, but within that kesher, you can't tell which is which. And then it works its way down. And that is this often indecipherable understanding of what's going on in the world, but we recognize it is all coming from Hashem Echad. And on that day, Hashem will be one, his name will be one, and we won't have these different names for Hashem. It will only be the name of Chesed, of kindness. That's the one name that we will have. So again, and in source number 3, and just as we must apply a unified understanding to the personality of God, we must strive to round out our own personality also. We also get pulled in many different ways, and we need to round out that personality in a consistent manner with the lesson of each Sefirat. Therefore, the keys to our opening, maintaining, and when necessary, repairing our relationship with God, the keys are bound up in understanding these Sfirot. Our goal, therefore, during these 49 days is to examine how each of the Sfirot affects our connection to God, our relationship with each other, and our understanding of ourselves. Okay, so now we can look at the significance of the Sfirot as they align with the period of the Omer. The 7 weeks then correspond to these 7 Sefirot. And each day, each of the 7 has 7 within it. So there is the 7 levels of the first, the 7 levels of the second, of the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. That's how we have these 49 days, and each one aligned to one general Sephira, and then each of those 7 Sefirot have 7 levels within it. So we start with the first Sefira and then ascend to the top level, 1 through 7 of that Sefira. Then we can start with the second Sefira, starting with the bottom rung of that, working our way up to the 7th rung, and then we're ready for the third Sefira. Once again, bottom rung, working our way up. Exactly, and that's what's contained in our Sidurim, and there's also a little tefillah, prayer, that aligns with each of these that we'll go through. We'll get to that shortly. Number 4, Rabbi Gedalia Shur in the Or Gedalyahu, which is an incredible sefer. Rabbi Gedalia Shur going on all the parshiot of the Torah, all the Torah portions, and also the Moadim, also the holidays. And he writes as follows: Yimei HaSfira Huzman L'Tikun HaMidot. When I was living in Muncie, I had the privilege of going to hear his son would speak at Or Sameach in Muncie Thursday nights, late Thursday night, and would give a shiur there, which was an incredible shiur. Yimei HaSfira, the days of Sfira, Huzman L'Tikun HaMidot, is a time to rectify character attributes. Shavuot Rishonah. So according to what we said before, the first week is the first one. It's L'Takein Midat HaChesed, on that attribute of Chesed. L'Takein HaAhava, that our love, Sheyeh Kara'ui, it should be done in an appropriate manner. Ahava LaHashem Yitbarach, love for God. Va'avat Chaverim, and love of friends, love of others. Shavua Sheni, the Shniya Midat Gevura. The second week is for that midah, the attribute of Gevura, of strength. L'Takein, to fix Midat Hayira, the fear, the awe of God. V'chein Kol HaShavuot. And that's how it works through all of these weeks. Like we said before, not just the week, but each day has that 7, is part of that 7 leveled structure of each of these. So let us get an understanding, a basic understanding of these 7 levels, these 7 sfirot that we've been discussing. Chesed, right? We turned the page for those, right? Loving kindness is the attribute which diffuses benevolence to all without limit. Creation itself is an act of chesed, as it is stated, Olam chesed yibaneh. The world was built with chesed. There was no zechut, merit that we had going in that made anyone or anything deserve this creation. It was built on chesed. Actually, there were 26 generations until the Torah was given. And it's those 26 generations, once with there's Torah, then we have a way, a means of, so to speak, contributing, earning our stay. Until then, it was all chesed. That's why one of the chapters of Tehillim, and we say this every Shabbat morning, is Ki Li'olam Chasto, because God's chesed is La'olam, is always, is eternal. And how many times do we say that? 26 times. Corresponding to those 26 generations before we were able to, so to speak, start to earn our keep. So creation, act of chesed. The attribute of chesed is also called gedula. In Shemona Esrei, we say Hashem Hakel HaGadol. We're talking about God's kindness, gedula. For life issues from him to an unlimited number of worlds and creatures. Chesed is called gadol. Even in our way of talking, if someone did a very, very generous, kind, other-centered act, what do we say? That was very big of you. That was very big of you. And why is chesed big, gadol? Well, if I'm worrying about myself, then I'm all of 5 foot 9 inches, right? 100 or whatever, a little too much right now, but 170 pounds, we'll say, whatever it is, right? That's all I am. But once I am involved in chesed, then there's no limit to who and what I am, because I'm touching, I'm reaching out, I'm connecting to so many others and playing an important role. So chesed is gedula. God is, of course, the gadol of gedula, for life issues from him to an unlimited number of worlds and creatures. As we learn from Abraham, it is the nature of the benevolent to want to do good. Abraham, who embodies chesed, we see the paradigm of endless loving kindness. His tent was open on all sides. Our chuppah at a Jewish wedding is representative of the tent of Abraham. He extended the warmest hospitality to all, but sometimes it was too much. In terms of Yishmael, we find that. So at times, when you have this unbridled, unbounded chesed, right, there's a concept, a beautiful concept, something like a tragic concept, that if you do kindness, if you're merachem on the achzarim, if you'll have kindness to those who are cruel, then in the end, you'll be achzari to the rachamim. You'll be cruel to those who deserve kindness. And we see this a number of times in Navi. We find that Shaul extended kindness to the nation of Amalek when he shouldn't have. And then what happens? Then he ends up wiping out Nov, Ir Kohanim. Nov, a city of Kohanim, who he suspected, based on Lashon Hara that he accepted, that they were helping David in what he viewed as David's insurrection against him. He wiped them all out. But we also have this concept of tough love, right? Sometimes, right, a person's there with a needle in his arm asking you for money. Maybe it's not the best idea to show kindness and give the person money at that time. Sorry? For another needle, right? So, right, kindness, chesed is great. However, where chesed is boundless, the next paragraph, gevura is the attribute of restraint. It has the power and ability to limit and to contract. In the act of creation, Gevura conceals from the created beings the activating force within them. Gevura is God hiding himself. Actually, we mentioned before, the Hebrew word for world is olam. The root of the word olam, ayin lam and mem, means concealment. So from a Jewish perspective, a Hebrew perspective, the definition of the world is hidden, meaning the place wherein God hides himself. This enables them, the existence, to exist as tangible entities instead of being utterly nullified within their source. Otherwise, we become overwhelmed by God's presence. We're not making any decisions. There's no personal growth. There's no earning of any godliness because we're just overwhelmed with God. And that's why, of course, how many ma'amarot, how many utterances were there in the creation of the world? Wild guess, there were 10. What was each of those? Each of those was a step down, filtering process of God's presence in this world until we get to the world we have here. We look out that window and we see, oh, that's nice. That's a tree. Okay, there are trees all around. What's a tree? Oh, that's Mother Nature. Or we look deeper and we say, are you kidding me? Each and every cell of that tree is a biological wonder world. Incredible. Every single one of those is creating energy from the sun and passing that on. I mean, and this happens randomly. So we're exactly at the point now, the 10 utterances, the Gevura brought this world to a point where we have our decisions. We make our free will. That is the Gevura where God conceals, and that enables us to exist and not be utterly nullified within their source. The patriarch Isaac is paralleled with Gevura. due to the dominance of this sphere within him. He restrained his emotions magnificently at the Akedah, right? We call it Akedas Yitzchak, right? Well, isn't it Avram who was doing the heavy lifting? Why is it called the binding of Isaac? Granted, Isaac got bound, but why are we mentioning Isaac, right? And that's one of Abraham's great tests, the culmination, according to most, of the 10 tests. Yes, but Yitzchak, according to Rashi and other approaches, Yitzchak was a man of 37 years old. That puts Abraham at what age? 137, right? Avram was 137 years old. Now imagine a 137-year-old and a 37-year-old, right? Who's going to overpower who and tie who down to the altar, right? But Isaac had this restraint, and therefore this is what God commanded, right? Everyone's life ends at a certain point. If this is what God has commanded, that this be an exception, and this is how my life is supposed to end, right? As Rabbi David Foreman puts it, you're in the swimming pool. At a certain point, you hear the whistle. The lifeguard says, "Everyone out of the pool." Okay. It was a great swim, but now it's time to out of the pool. That time comes around for everyone. That and taxes, right? No one evades that, right? That time comes around. Isaac understood, okay, I guess this is my time right now through this strange manner. But that is incredible gevura. Isn't it interesting that Yitzchak, for gevura, Yitzchak, Isaac, the word Yitzchak is laughter. Now, laughter is not something that we normally associate with gevura, with din, with judgment. But the fact is, what causes us to laugh? Surprise and incongruity.
Irony?
Right? You didn't expect that to be coming. That's what causes us to laugh. That's humor, right? So in order to understand incongruity, one needs to be able to measure what should be and what should not be, right? That is laughter and gevura. But even taking Yisroel a step further, this whole life is a cause of laughter. This whole life is such incongruity. What have I done to deserve it before I was born? What am I doing to continue? So it is an absolute gift. Every moment is an absolute gift. And that is Yitzchak, laughter, gevura. Gevura is also called law and judgment, the third paragraph. Judgment demands that chesed be distributed justly, in proportion to the recipient's merit, and not in a boundless, gratuitous fashion. So Gevura says, yeah, chesed, well, why do you deserve this? Why should you have this? So these two forces go against, run counter to one another. So how is it then meant to work? Without Gevura, Chesed would not have the boundaries needed in order for creation to exist. In terms of humanity, if Chesed was dominant, the earth would be full of sinners, since love would cover all iniquity. Conversely, if Gevura was dominant, no person could withstand the scrutiny of judgment. Both Chesed and Gevura operate successfully through a mediating faculty. And that is the Sefira of Tiferet. Okay? Tiferet, which we said before, we defined that before as a splendor. And that's why when you see diagrams of the 10 Sefirot, you've got the Chesed, Gevura, and then it meets in the middle at Tiferet. You have the Netzach and Hod meets together at Yesod, and then we have Malchut. Yes. Yes, often. I'm sorry, Allah? Splendor. Let's see what that means.
And Rabbi,
Okay.
isn't kind of balance Sefirat?
Yes, it balances those two, Janet.
And then on Gevura, you often also hear it referred to as strength, maybe because you have the strength to restrain yourself. I don't know. But you hear Gevura as strength, and then how does Gevura compare to Mitzrayim, which is also some sort of constraint or restraint?
I'm not sure, but let's come back to it afterwards. Let's keep the flow going here with this, okay? And
Thank
then,
you.
we try to unpack that a little bit later.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So both Chesed, and Gvura operate successfully through a mediating faculty, the Sefira of Tiferet. Tiferet, splendor, what does that mean? We'll soon see. Blends Chesed and Gevura with harmonious and beautiful results. It can be compared to a garment dyed with many colors and blended in such a way that gives rise to beauty and decoration. Within humankind, it is equated with the attribute of compassion, right? There's kindness, there is this gevura, this judgment, and there is rachamim, compassion. Whereas chesed would give even to a person to whom compassion is not at all appropriate, right? So chesed, the kindness, yes, but it's not compassionate to give to someone who's going to use that to harm themselves. Right? Compassion, you have to be careful. Right? Compassion is this proper measuring and fusion of the chesed and the gevura. Tiferet seeks to pity a person to whom compassion is appropriate, and then to extend benevolence to him as well, regardless of worthiness. Right? So this unbounded chesed is often great, but not always great. We have to be careful who is the recipient of that. Tiferet is also equated with truth, emet, in the sense that both chesed and gevura agree to its flow. Do we hear that? Emet means truth. So therefore, if both chesed says, yes, I agree it needs to be limited over here, and gvura says, yes, over here the spigot needs to be opened up, then that is emet. When we can combine the two, that is how we come to emet. That is how we come to this idea of truth. Yaakov Avinu, right? Avraham was chesed. Yitzchak was Gevura. Yaakov is this Midah of Tiferet, which is taking those two. He's referred to as the Bechir HaAvot, the chosen one amongst the Avot, amongst the patriarchs, because he's able to take those two aspects of Abraham and Yitzchak and fuse the two with this balanced Tiferet result. The next three Sefirot are Netzach, Hod, and Yisod. These three are extensions of Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet. Once again, in that sketch or image that we often see of the Sefirot. So we have the Chesed, the Gevura, the Netzach, and Netzach, Hod, and then Yisod. Right, the Chesed, Gevura on either side, as are the Netzach and Hod. Tiferet is in the middle, the fusion of the two. Yisod is also in the middle, the fusion of those two. Let's see what they mean. The word Netzach comes from the word mitnatseach, which means to conquer or to overcome. Netzach therefore denotes the idea of dominance. By giving in an unlimited way, one is overwhelming the other. And in this respect, it is an extension of chesed, right? The result of this unabated chesed is netzach. The person is overwhelmed. The person is simply just overwhelmed by all that you're doing, not leaving room for the self. By giving in an unlimited way, one is overwhelming the other, and in this respect, it is an extension of chesed. Hod is just the opposite. an extension of Gevura. It denotes restraint to the point of submission, right? I could be so restrained that there is no initiative, there's no stepping forward, there's no stepping up to the plate, right? We say, "B'makom she'ein ish, sham tehei ish." In the place where there is no one to step up, you must step up. B'makom she'esh ish, conversely, if there is someone there, don't feel you always need to be center stage. But when there's something that needs to be done, be willing to step up. Hod, right, could be this point of submission. Hod stems from the word hoda'ah, which means to thank, to admit, or to submit. Total dominance over another is a netzach relationship. Total submission is a hod relationship. Yisod balances the two, facilitates communication. Right? There needs to be that understanding. Communication brings out at what point is it appropriate, when is it not? And therefore we say Yisod Olam. That is the foundation of the world. So whereas the first ones are within myself, the second group is more within relationships and dealing with others. In summary, chesed denotes unlimited giving. Gevura parallels unlimited restraint. Tiferet is a harmonious blend. Netzach and Hod adapt the influence for transmission, right? Meaning, again, how am I dealing with others? And Yesod transmits with this deep attachment. The 10th Sefirat is called Malchut. Essentially, Malchut is the receiver or recipient of influence from the higher Sefirot, and then is able to then pass it through. Okay. The Baal HaTanya, right, which is the Bible for Lubavitcher Hasidim. The Baal HaTanya writes, Ach kadei lahagi lemala umadrega zu. In order to reach this high level, one must count the Sefirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. This is what it means, count 50 days. That the contemplation of the greatness of the Infinite One, blessed be He, is 49 aspects, alluded to in the verse we had before, Ki L'cha Hashem HaGedula V'Hagvura, that's the verse we started for, we had earlier, which are the 7 midot of the upper world of Atzilut. Okay, there are different worlds, and the highest world is Atzilut. Each one of them in turn is made up of 7, totaling 49. The 50th gate is the upper gate, which includes all the aspects, and everything in this is contained within the 49 aspects, which are united to a single unity, a single entity, that it all comes together. And that's why, as Stephen mentioned, we have in our Sidurim, at the point where the Torah, where the Sidur tells us about Sefirat HaOmer, we have a tefillah there, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, etc. Wherever may be your will, that in the merit of the counting of the Omer that I've counted, may everything that I have damaged in the Sefirah of, and then you mention which one it is, which one of the 7 of the 7, which day of the 7 days of the 7 weeks, may it be fixed, may I be purified and sanctified with holiness from above. So we have over here the idea being that one should try to concentrate on each of these days. I mentioned on Shabbos last week that Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, is Hod Sheba Hod, is the glory of the glory, the splendor of the splendor. That is the yahrzeit of the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was able to exemplify that, the Hod Sheba Hod, the Tiferet of the Tiferet, the glory of the glory, the splendor of the splendor. Each day has its unique energy and power that we are meant to try to tap into and to see for ourselves, what can I do in this day that represents what this day actually represents. That is one way of looking at these 49 days lead up. There's another way of looking at it, and that is based on a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of the Fathers, in the 6th chapter, which speaks about the 48 ways through which Torah is acquired. This was made very popular by the legendary Rav Noach Weinberg of blessed memory of Eish HaTorah, the founder of the worldwide Eish HaTorah yeshiva movement, and he has it as the 48 ways of wisdom. And in past years, we've had that as the focus of our study on Shavuot night, each person taking one of those 48 ways and giving a little talk on it. But that's based on this Mishnah of us, which is our Torah niknit, ba'arba shmona dvarim. The Torah is acquired through 48 qualities, which is study, attentive listening, saying one's studies aloud, intuitive understanding, discernment, awe of teachers, fear of heaven, humility, joy, purity, serving the wise, being close with fellow students, evaluative discussion with fellow students, calmness, knowledge of Tanakh, knowledge of Mishnah, moderation in business activity, moderation in worldly activity, moderation in physical pleasure, moderation in sleep, moderation in speech, moderation in merrymaking, slowness to anger, having a good heart, faith in the sages, accepting suffering, knowing one's place, being happy with what one has, making a fence around one's words, not boasting, endearing oneself to others, loving God, loving his creatures. Fascinating. That's number 33, right? And that was, again, going back to the students we discussed last Shabbat, going back to the students of Rabbi Akiva, that in order for them to be the transmitters of Torah, they need to have all of these 48. And this was where the Talmud says that they were lacking. Loving righteousness, loving justice, loving to have one's mistakes corrected, right? Famously, Rabbi Yochanan, when his chavrusa, Reish Lakish, died, he was inconsolable. Right? He had no one to study with. So someone came to study with him, and he got so frustrated. He said, whatever I say, you bring me 24 proofs that I'm right. Reish Lakish would bring me 24 challenges to what I was saying. And based on those challenges, we need to work harder and deeper and get a better understanding. I don't need a yes man. I need someone who's going to challenge me and make sure that I have it right. That is loving to have one's mistakes corrected. It's humbling, but that's what enables there to be growth. Keeping far from honor, not being arrogant about one's knowledge, not enjoying making halachic decisions. It's a big responsibility. Sharing another person's troubles, judging others positively, setting them in the path of truth, setting them in the path of peace, teaching calmly, asking and answering, listening and adding insight, studying in order to teach, studying in order to do the mitzvot, making one's teacher wiser by asking good questions, reflecting over one's lessons, repeating an idea in the name of the person who said it first. For we learned, whoever repeats an idea in the name of the originator brings redemption to the world. As it says in the Megillah, Esther told the king in Mordechai's name. What did she tell Achashverosh in Mordechai's name? The assassination plot of Vixen and Teresh against Achashverosh. That's what got written down in his book of Chronicles. And that is what jumped out at him that night that he couldn't sleep. The next day he's having the meeting with Haman and Esther. And then he finds out what's going on. And they take out the book of Chronicles and he hears Mordecai saved his life. What was done for him? Absolutely nothing. Oh, really? Uh-oh. Who's in the courtyard? Haman's in the courtyard. Send him in. What should I do to a person the king wants to honor? He thinks, who does the king want to honor more than? Me. Of course, Achashverosh says, he gives a whole long litany and says, do all of that for Mordechai the Yehudi. And that was that inflection point when it went from Haman's power and our being pushed down to our ascent and Haman being squelched. So these 48 ways are all meant to be aligned. Rav Kotler, the legendary Rosh Yeshiva of the Lakewood Yeshiva, he writes as follows: the days of counting the Omer are days of preparation for the giving of the Torah. Since acquiring Torah depends on the 48 ways the Torah is acquired, it is like all of the things which can only be acquired through the appropriate mechanism. Therefore, it is clear that the way to prepare is through these 48 ways. The 49 days correspond to the 49 gates of understanding and also to the 49 faces of the Torah, facets. The 48 days correspond to 48 ways the Torah is acquired. The 49th day is the completion for purity and preparation for receiving the Torah. The reason this preparation is connected to the Omer is to entrench and implant within us the recognition that everything comes from God, which is the meaning of the Omer, the offering of the first crops. Okay. Lastly, from the Chendas Yamim, quoted in the Sifsei Chaim or Chaim Friedlander, the days of Sefirat to Omer are days of incredible spiritual potential as well as critical significance. Hinei roi ladat, it's worthy, it's important to know that the days between Pesach and Shavuot are greatly sanctified. Lid kadesh b'kedusha el yonah. They are sanctified with a heavenly, lofty holiness. Asher b'kerev hayom during these days, hakedusha rabba v'holechet. The sanctity, the holiness increases, constantly increases, ad yom matan Torah, until we reach the day of Shavuot, the day of the giving of the Torah. Uvehem yimatzei kol ish Yisroel ezer v'siyua. And therefore, during these days, every person has this heavenly help, this heavenly push, this divine assistance. L'takein et nafsho, to fix, correct one's soul. L'kedusha u'letara, for holiness and for purity. V'hema yamim noraim. These are awesome days. V'omdim v'rumo shel olam. They stand at the pinnacle, at the heights of the world. V'amar kadmonim, and earlier sources have said, Ki amim ha'ela hema la'ot u'lemofet l'chol hashana kula. These days serve as a sign and an indication for the rest, the entire rest of the year. Kim yirba bahem b'torah v'mitzvot. If a person will be able to involve oneself, increase their Torah, their mitzvot during this time, kein hiyeh me'reshit hashana v'ad acharit hashana. So too, that will be the case that for the year that then stretches out from this. And so to the opposite. So these are important and crucial days. We have the Torah build-up aspect, we have the Kabbalistic aspect, and we have the job of rolling up our sleeves and making sure that these days are days of significance as we come to probably the most historic day in the course of humanity, which was that revelation to an entire nation of God, revelation, Mount Sinai, to an entire people. Yes, Janet, you asked something else before.
The difference or comparison between Mitzrayim, which I've heard as being both constraint and restraint, and Devorah. And how come some people also say Devorah is strength? You're strong.
Okay, so Mitzrayim actually comes from the root word Neitzar, which means constraints. And that's the idea that, we spoke about the overdoing of Gevura. So that was this complete submission. And that's what Mitzrayim was. Mitzrayim was this over Gevura to the point of submission, or trying to make us. And that's what we needed to leave that. right? Hod, we said before, an extended gevura denotes restraint to the point of submission, right? We said that's imposing that on others, this complete meitzar,
So
right?
what, uh,
And that's what we
Hod
needed
is
to
a
leave.
subset of Gevurah, or it's more
I'm
like
sorry?
Mitzrayim? Hod is a subset of Gevurah, or is it more
Yes.
like Mitzrayim? I mean,
Hod is the extension of gevura, and we saw that exemplified in Mitzrayim, where they tried to make enslavement is certainly this the complete submission of someone else. That's
so
what.
when so Hod and Mitzrayim are related, so therefore that's why I was kind of thinking that Mitzrayim and Gevurah are also related, because if Hod
Yeah,
is
yeah, that
so
was
there some
absolute
people
constraint.
say
Yeah,
Mitzrayim is restraint, and that's a misuse of the definition of the word, right?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Sometimes rather than constraint, I've heard people say Mitzrayim is restraint, like you're restraining
Restraining oneself as opposed to constraining someone else.
or restraining someone else. So is that a misuse of the word? And
I'm not sure about the English or the restrain and constrain, right? It was incredible gevura that was trying to bring us to a point of submission that we need to break out from, right? And that's the Yitziat Mitzrayim that we need to have every year, right? Besides the leaving of Egypt, there is the Meitzarim, there is that which constrains us, right? And that is what we need to have a yitzia from. So even though we're not in Egypt, we are all in a state of meitzarim, right? And therefore, that's what we need to have, our own personal yitziat mitzrayim every year.
And then how does that compare to asarim, like being bound, or when we say free?
Similar, right? That goes back to, I think you would ask me about other, we have many, the Malbim is known for taking these two words that seem to be similar and letting us know the exact difference between them. The Siddur Hagra also takes a lot of the tefillah and explains those differences between these words that are they're very similar. We say that every language has its has what is most prevalent in that, right? So with us, we have many words for thanks and many words for serving Hashem, right? In Italy, right, they have all these different names for all these different pastas, right? You go there, you have all these different boxes, different name on it. We grew up with, what do we have? Noodles. We had noodles. That was the all-encompassing term for anything that looked like that. Whatever shape it was noodles. Right? But right. So by us, it's thanks and it is service. That's where we have all of our words. We have just one word, noodles, for everything else, and then we have that. Yeah. So the exact nuanced difference, Janet, between each of those, I'm not able to tell you off the top of my head.
All right, thank you. And then, is it better to work on the Torah aspect or on improving yourself and your relations with others? I mean, how do you, during these 49 days, how do you know?
I would say yes.
I mean,
I'll give you an unqualified yes. We work on our Torah. We work on our dealing with ourselves, dealing with Hashem, dealing with others. Right? There's enough time in the day that we can devote at least some to both of those. Yes, an unqualified yes. Okay, my friends, we'll call it over here. Yes, Esther.
So women are not obligated to count the owner.
Correct.
So does that mean that women don't need to improve in these areas? I mean, what?
So we have a general rule about mitzvot aseh shazman grama that these time-bound mitzvot, positive mitzvot, women are not fully obligated in it. They certainly can, and are often encouraged by most of them are encouraged to do so. An idea is, a couple ideas. A woman is a time-bound mitzvah. Her whole body works on a certain time-bound schedule. So a woman, but the idea being that we have these different reminders. The tefillin are there as a reminder, and the kippah is there as a reminder. And a lot of these things are there as reminders whereas women who are asani kirtsono are more intuitively, inherently aligned. They're not in need of all of these to reach their perfection. Right? You're starting ahead of us, right? And we're trying to catch up.
It only sounds quasi-time because you can count any time in the dark, any time when it's dark. So it's not like,
Or the next day, but then it passes. It's only these 49 days. Let's say, a person wakes up, oh, I feel so bad. I didn't, it's the middle of summer. I forgot to count Sefira. Oh, so should they start counting Sefira then? Count 49 days? That's time bound. That's time bound. Yeah. Okay. We'll call it over here, my friends. Ladies and gentlemen.